They would call the first ditch in the village the AcequiaMadre, the mother ditch, as if the Hispanic settlers wanted to acknowledge it as the source of life and sustenance and community. The rains and snows that fall on the Rocky Mountains are the source. They flow as streams, pulverizing stone and wood and leaves, taking vitamins and minerals with them as they carve canyons out of solid rock. At the place where the mountain joins the streams, about 1,000 years ago, the Puebloans built their communities on a stream. They were moving from a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence to a settled agricultural one, and water was the key. They learned that you could dam up a stream and save some water for later, and in so doing, they created some of the first forms of irrigated agriculture here. Further downstream, Hispanic villages, now some nearly 400 years old, they too chose this place because of water, and they took it up a notch. They used math and science, engineering, agricultural technology, and surveying that they learned from the Moors and the Romans before that, who learned it from the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians before that. So in fact, the Acequias we see are traditions 7,000 years in the making that crossed 4 continents to get here. In the Hispanic villages, the Acequias got their own day each year where the men would leave early and clean and clear the ditch, and the women would prepare a feast for the evening when they would come together and celebrate another year of access to life-giving water. The Acequias were always about community. Further downstream, in the Hispanic towns along the trade routes and the railroads, the Americans came about 200 years ago, and they chose this place because of its sophisticated infrastructure, of which the Acequias were a part. The only problem is they took the long linear fields that the Hispanic villagers used and broke them into sections, plopped little houses down on them and built fences. And it's easy to see why they could look outside at a dying Acequia and say, I don't have water rights, what's in it for me? But we know now that the value of the Acequias is much greater than that, and here's what I mean. Grandparents in New Mexico still tell stories, and some of you probably remember the days when the snow came up to here in town in the winter. That translated to floods in spring, fertile fields in the summer, and abundant harvest in fall, and it's not like that anymore. Yet people keep coming to New Mexico and dropping wells like straws into our aquifers, and now from Mora to Cuesta to Belen, wells are running dry. And this year, for the first time in history, when the mayordomos of Taos went up to the mountain to check the snow gauge to see how much snow there would be and therefore how much water, there was no snow on the gauge at all. But what's that got to do with acequias? Here's an interesting thing. An unlined earthen ditch will lose up to 80% of its water. It loses it 3 ways. The first we used to think was bad, and now we know is good. It evaporates, which feeds the water cycle. The second part is still bad, overgrowth, and specifically with non-native trees and plants, which require twice as much water to survive. The third way is kind of amazing. The water leaves through the edges of the ditch and goes down into the earth. It passes through layers of gravel and stone and is scrubbed clean and recharges the aquifers with pure, clean water. See, when the acequias work, they give us access to local sustainable agriculture, and they also give us access to water. They give us building materials and allow us to adapt to climatic change. They promote flood control, and they give us beautiful, healthy ecosystems. In fact, if you look at a satellite image of New Mexico, the only green you will see is along the rivers and the streams and then the acequias. 10 feet on either side of that stream, you're going to find amphibians and insects, birds, mammals, wildflowers, fruits, and nuts that you won't find anywhere else. That's part of what gives us our sense of place and part of what surrounds us with beauty. And wildcrafters know, if they're trained in our ancient traditions, that you can walk the acequias at certain times of the year and collect those leaves and fruits and nuts and roots and turn them into medicine, which allows us to address our health in sustainable ways. See, the acequias were sustainable before sustainable was cool, but when sustainable was necessary, right? They worked then, and they can work again. And the powers that be say there's not enough money and there's not enough manpower, and we may never have enough money, so let's take that off the table right now. As far as manpower goes, though, the first acequia in New Mexico took 1,500 people to build. And it's going to take the entire community to rebuild. The good news is it's only one day a year. So now that we know more about the acequias, we can take that to our communities and we can support the coalitions that are supporting these ideas. We can take the idea to our legislators at the local, state, and national levels and ask for laws and policies which treat the acequias as part of an overall water management strategy. It's just good sense. The best way we can honor the past, the traditions, and the cultures of the acequias is to restore them. And we can look to the future. Native Americans say to look 7 generations ahead, so that when our grandchildren's grandchildren see their working AcequiaMadre, their mother ditch, they know that it's the source of life and sustenance and community. And the very best part is, by including the acequias as how we perceive sustainable community, we put ourselves on the path to become one.